Hey pen friends, it's Kaitlin. Welcome back to another journal chat. Full disclosure, this video was completely unplanned as of 10 minutes ago. To give you an idea of how we got here, I was sitting on the couch, relaxing, and I'm not sure why, but the idea dawned on me that it had been about 6 months almost now that I had been consistent with my planner, which is my passport bullet journal here. And I guess those thoughts aren't surprising because it is kind of coming up to the mid-year point. I know I'm thinking about the Techo Kaigi mid-year check-in and all that, but as I was thinking about my consistency in this planner and the fact that I had stayed in it for 6 months, I realized that it actually has been more than 6 months because I also used this planner last year. And as of filming this, I have no intentions of moving. I'm feeling really happy, very settled, and very content with this book, and I really don't want to change anything up. So after that kind of mental loop and realizing those things, I felt really inspired to reflect and sit down and get out my notepad, which is how I like to think when I need to think, and figure out, or at least try to, what was the secret sauce that has allowed me to do that with this book. Because previously I've had a fairly consistent habit of not being able to be consistent with my books at all. And so I sat down, I took some time, I thought about it, I wrote it down, and I came up with 4 things which I thought we could just hang out and I could share with you today in the hopes that maybe these things resonate with you. Coming up to the mid-year point, I know this is a big time that people sit and reflect on their systems and want to kind of implement changes so they can stay consistent for the rest of the year. So I'm hoping that these ideas or tips that I'm going to share today might help you as you start to kind of reflect on your system and try to figure out how you can get ready for the end of the year. So that is what we're going to do today. It's probably going to be more of a podcast style video because I don't have any idea of what I'm going to show you, but maybe editing me will figure something out. We will see. Alrighty, so starting off with the first one, and this may come as no surprise, but the first and most obvious thing you kind of need to know in order to be consistent with a book, a planner, a journal, is you need to have a good idea of what works for you. And I think with this, it's important to emphasize that knowing what works for you is not something you know right away. I think it's something that you need time and experimentation and trying different things to figure out. So for people just starting out with planning, you're probably not going to figure out what is the best way for you to plan or what is the best way for you to journal right out of the gate. You're probably going to try something, maybe it'll work and you'll just keep using it, or maybe it will be the opposite and your planner, which you wanted to help you be productive, is doing the exact opposite and you're getting nothing done. And I think allowing space to have the time to experiment, to try things, to start to whittle that down is super important. I think along with that, the other key thing is you need to allow for self-reflection on those things. So if something isn't working, thinking about why, what need is it not addressing? Why is it not working for you? Is it because something about the layout isn't working? Is it the actual structure of the book? Do you find it hard to write in or too small? Or maybe the grid is too big? All of those things are things you can consider. But the trick is you need to reflect on why things aren't working so you can start to identify what things are working, and that will hopefully help you guide yourself to a system where almost everything is working for you and you feel like you can stay with it. And something else to mention with this is obviously having an idea of what works for you. One of the big kind of pillars of that is going to be your lifestyle and your maybe work needs, your personal life needs, things like that. And something to be aware of is, at least in my experience, when I've had large life changes, sometimes that will also result in my planner or journal changing too. So when I went from being a student to working as a full-time designer, my planner did shift because there were certain needs I needed to adjust for that the way I planned as a student didn't necessarily work and translate well into being a full-time designer working, 40-hour weeks. With that though, I would caution you and think about if you could make these tweaks or iterations in the existing system. Are there things you could do with what you have now that would solve the problem? Or is the problem at that level where you need to, instead of iterating, redesign the entire system and start from scratch? So a little kind of sub point to consider with that one. It is really easy when you realize one thing doesn't work to just kind of throw the notebook out the window and jump into something else. But unfortunately, that doesn't always work. So I found trying to solve it within the current book can be not only more effective sometimes, but also it's less time consuming because you're not having to put the time into setting up a new system, which can be important to some people. So that is the first one, having a good idea of what works for you. And it will take time to figure this out. For me, as I've journaled, I've learned that there's certain grid sizes that are important to me. I don't like a large grid. I like a 4mm grid or smaller. I know that I like books where it's easy to open them and have them lay flat. I don't want my hand falling off the page when I'm writing in the notebook, which is why for me I usually use traveler's notebooks because they have very thin booklet systems that you can use in these leather covers. And I've also learned that I personally don't like a pre-structured, well, I shouldn't say that. I fall in this fun little middle space where I like some structure, but I can't have too much structure because if I feel restricted, then that's also an issue. So having that sweet spot between structure so that I kind of can easily go in and plan and not be in this decision paralysis loop, but also having the flexibility so that if I do have small changes, I want to add something here, tweak something here, I can still do that. Which is why I tend to use the bullet journal method in my planner because it's very flexible and highly adaptable. So those are some examples of things that work for me. I'm sure you have other ones, but let's move on to the next point, which this one was kind of hard for me to articulate, to be honest. I wrote down, have other hobbies. And what I mean by this is, the best way I can explain it is there's this saying I heard one time. I don't know why because I don't have a car. So I'm not sure how this came up in regular conversation, but I once was listening to someone and they said, when people buy old cars, they buy them for two reasons. They buy them to drive the car and, go out and drive this old car around and use it. And the other reason is they buy the car to work on it. It's a project and it's something that they want to work on and tinker with and play with. And that is why they bought the car. And I think that's a very good kind of metaphor for journaling, especially if you are really into stationery and planners and it is a hobby for you. I think having a good idea of why you want to use a planner, why you want to use a journal, what do you want to get out of it? If it's something that you want to use because you want to play and tinker and iterate and kind of play with the book itself and kind of it be within the book that is your focus, it's tinkering with the book. It's fixing the book, iterating the book, maybe trying a new book because you want to try a new thing. That's one thing to keep in mind. But if why you want to use a planner is because you want to keep a, analog copy of your task list, because if you don't have a to-do list, your brain is totally scattered for the entire day and you feel stressed out, then that might be why you want to use the book. And if that is the focus, then I've found that the interest in hopping or changing up things rapidly kind of decreases because, again, going back to number one, once you figure out what you want and you have it working, like 70, 80%, maybe it's not perfect. There's things about my journals that, I wish this little thing was different or that little thing was different, but overall, it's good enough. It gets the job done for what I need it to do, and to switch to something else that might be more optimized to that need isn't something I want to do, because I don't really want to put the time into setting up the thing and figuring out the thing, and then what if it doesn't work, and then I have to go into something else or iterate on that, and it's just a lot of mental energy that I personally don't want to focus on. So I think with that, why I say have other hobbies is, I think for myself, I found planning being a hobby. What's really helped me kind of not be super inconsistent, especially with my planner, is I have other things that I like to do in my free time besides journaling and playing with stationery, like reading, or for me, I also really like gaming, so that when you have that chunk of free time where you want to decompress and relax, maybe sometimes you want to use your planner, but other times you maybe want to play Tears of the Kingdom on your Nintendo Switch. So I found kind of dividing up that hobby time so it's not fully focused on my planners and journals also just leaves less space for, thinking about how you could change things or buy this thing or do this thing to optimize or make your system perfect. And a lot of times people talk about this with capsule wardrobes, and I'm not going to go into it here too much, but being aware of this idea of your fantasy self. And again, going back to the have a good idea of what works for you and your needs. Make sure that what you're doing is for you. It's not for someone else. And that actually segues really nicely into the next point, which is item number 3, the key or the secret sauce to journal consistency. The third one is make an effort to avoid enabling and influencing. So for myself, I did this year because I noticed in January that I was watching a lot of planner and journaling content on YouTube and Instagram, and I noticed it was kind of directly tied to me wanting to change things up. So I stopped it, and what I did was I decided to stop watching journal videos on YouTube in the morning, and instead, if I wanted to watch it, it would be something I did later in the day, because I found that first couple hour in the morning, I was just very susceptible mentally to being influenced. So that was something I did. I think there's kind of 2 ways you can do this in terms of the enabling and the influencing. One, you can do what I did and reduce the amount of time you spend watching journaling and planning content. I think going cold turkey is probably not going to work for most of us. I love watching planner videos. I love seeing what the people are doing, and my friends who are on the internet seeing kind of what their system is doing and all of that stuff. So I would never want to stop watching videos. I think it's just about and not watching in excess of it. I think the second thing that really helps is if you're in a certain type of system, like a traveler's notebook, or you use a bullet journal, or you use a Hobonichi, or a ring planner. I can't think of any other ones, but I think you get the gist. Maybe focus on following people and getting content from people who use the same system as you. A lot of times, I've noticed with myself, I have been influenced to try a different book and switch into something because someone I really liked also switched into that thing, and that really enabled me and inspired me to make the switch too. Which can be good, but I feel like most of the times the reasons why they're switching don't align again with your needs. And then, you just start to use this thing which you realize after a couple of months isn't really something that was gonna ever work. The final thing, and I think this one, I think they're all pretty solid tips, but I think this one for me was a more recent realization, is you will get bored. You're gonna get bored of your planner, you're gonna get bored of your journal once it's been, I guess the time will vary depending on the person. For some of us, it'll be a couple months, a couple weeks, maybe half of a year until you get kind of bored with your planner, because the novelty of it being a new book and a new system will wear off. And I think something super, super, super key to avoiding the boredom translating to switching into something completely new is you need to find ways to bring novelty back to your book without it being hopping. Unless, going back to the have other hobbies point, what you get out of your planner or journal is playing with it. And the goal of it for you is to have fun in it and switch things up. And that is what you find your intention for the book in versus using it for specific things. So avoiding boredom, I think, can be different for different people. I think there's kind of two ways you can avoid boredom. There's ways that involve money and ways that don't involve money. And, you know, there's been a lot of really great videos on the internet around the planner and stationery community around overconsumption. So I think those are kind of good ones to consider with this point, because I think a very easy way to not be bored, similar to switching into a new book completely, is to shop and buy things. And I actually think that it's not necessarily a bad thing all the time. And the example I'll give is with my passport bullet journal. A couple months ago, I was feeling a little just kind of unsettled a little bit. It was feeling the same. It's had the same setup for almost half a year now, and I wanted something to kind of make it feel fresh, change things up a little bit. But as I said, I don't want to switch out of this book because honestly, I don't want to put the time into doing it, and I'm happy with how it works now. So what I did was I went into my journal stash and I ended up switching up the charm on the cover. So I switched it to one of my charms from Baumkuchen. I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to swap the inside item here. I'm thinking I might swap this to a photo of my dog just to make it feel a little different, you know, a little more new. And for me, just the charm switch kind of gave me that feeling of newness that satisfied that little kind of craving. So obviously that was solved through shopping and buying things. I didn't buy this charm immediately. I bought it a couple months ago, but it was through the act of shopping and then I guess shopping in your own collection that I was able to kind of satisfy that. Also, I think there's ways to satisfy that without shopping, you know, like maybe switching up the inside. So for example, that one, I wasn't shopping, I just printed off a photo of my dog and cut it out. So that's one way you could do it. Maybe changing up a layout in your book or something like that, incorporating a new supply that you have in your existing collection. Those are all things that you can do as well. And yeah, that's why I say I don't think shopping is always a bad thing. I think sometimes you want to kind of change things up, and maybe buying a new charm for your notebook that you've been using for a while is, you know, a nice little treat that continues to encourage you to use it versus kind of getting to the point where you're just so over it that you want to switch into something new. I'm sure there's also a big piece of this around, you know, if you want something, kind of having the self-control to like evaluate if it makes sense to do that, or if you don't want to spend money, being like, look, now is not the time. But it depends on your budget and what your needs are. For me, I like to kind of, you know, switch up my charms, switch up my covers, things like that, so that it feels new. That's also why I love the Traveler's Notebook system. Not to bias you, but for me, because I know I do get bored occasionally, being able to change things like the cover and the visual appearance and the charms and customize it in those ways without having to change the actual guts of the notebook, which is my actual system, I find really, really cool, because then I can kind of get that newness, change things up, have things look different, but I'm not actually doing anything that compromises my system or changes my system and has me kind of moving into a completely new book. So that is kind of the fourth item. So to summarize, The 4 points were: 1, have a good idea of what works for you or have a good idea of your needs. 2, have other hobbies, or really have a good idea of what you want to get out of your notebook and really self-identify if playing with the notebook and playing with the stationery is part of that or not. And maybe it's a bit of both, and that's okay too. 3, make an effort to avoid enabling and influencing. And 4, finding ways to bring out novelty when you inevitably get bored. And those are all the points I wanted to talk to you about today. Let me know what you find helpful when it comes to journal consistency, planner consistency, if you've been experiencing that yourself for the past year so far or multiple years. I'm sure there's a lot of other great tips out there that would be beneficial that I would love to hear. I'm sure everyone else would love to hear as well. I hope that what I shared today will help you with your analog journey for the rest of 2025 and help you figure out how to get the best system that works the best for you and makes you feel the happiest. I will say, for the people who are wanting to be consistent but aren't there yet, but really want to, being able to not move around and have that steady, stable system feels really good. And quite honestly, it feels better than moving into a new notebook. So, just give yourself the time to figure it out. You'll get there if that's something you really want to do. If you really want to be consistent, you can do it. If you don't want to be consistent, just forget everything I said and party on. But if it's something you really want to do, you'll get there. Just figure out the right way to do it that works for you. And besides that, thank you so much for watching, hanging out with me, journaling maybe along to this video. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in another journaling chat in the future. Bye, everybody.